welcome to our Bible Ponder for this week. We're going to be finishing up Luke chapter 20 today and looking at a couple of sort of verbal sparring matches that Jesus has with some of the teachers of the law, and specifically named the Sadducees. And we're going to see how they continue their strategy of trying to get Jesus to sort of incriminate himself. Remember, we've said previously that they're looking for a way to kill him, but they know that if they were to just try and kill him or have him assassinated or anything, he's too popular. And so they are afraid of him, both because they think he's going to start a revolt, start a revolution, he's maybe upsetting the peace, or he's just challenging their authority and doing things that they are frustrated by. But if they were to just try and have him assassinated, it might start a riot, which is antithetical to their goal. And so they're trying to find a way to come up with a way to charge Jesus legitimately so that they can get him away and get him out and kill him without the people being too mad about it. And so they try and trap him in sort of theological quandaries so that at the very least he could incriminate himself, not even to the point of getting himself killed, but even just to losing the people's favor. So here we are in chapter 20, beginning in verse 20. Keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies questioned him. "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" And so this is kind of a good question. It's a question that they were asking. So both this and the next section where they're trying to trap Jesus were common kind of debate topics of the day. And this one specifically is, should you pay money to Rome, which was kind of frowned upon and not thought of very nicely by a lot of people, but also if you were to not pay taxes, you are defying Rome and thereby incurring their wrath, upsetting the peace, and again, probably starting a bit of a revolution. There was a controversy over paying of tax and the use of Roman coins prior to Jesus's life that ended up in a quite bloody massacre where Rome came in and sort of laid down the law on the people who were refusing. So this is a question they had, but they're not asking it sincerely. They're asking it as a trap. And that's something that I think we need to remember, that this isn't just like, hey, let's have a debate, but really they are trying to trap him. And Luke, as Luke often does, adds a bit of sort of parenthetical narration. We don't always get the kind of narrator's comment to kind of tell you what's going on, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's often just presented to us, but Luke does give it to us here. He saw through their duplicity and said to them, "Show me a denarius, whose image and inscription are on it." "Caesar's," they replied. He said to them, "Then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." They were unable to trap him in what he said there in public, and astonished by his answer, they became silent. So Jesus, in a way, advocates paying taxes, but not in a way where he's really picking a side. What he does is sort of poke a hole in their balloon by they're asking, "Oh, should we do this?" Because clearly, paying taxes to Rome is wrong. There are oppressors, and also the coins had the emperor's image on it. So in ancient Palestine, they had copper coins that were minted there that would have had the emperor's inscription, but not his face. But they were not allowed to mint gold and silver coins, but they would have been in circulation there. And the gold and silver coins, especially the denarius, had the image of the emperor on it. It actually, if you look at one of the coins, I think I actually showed this in this sermon in Ellen in the last couple of years. It has an image of the emperor on it, and it also has an inscription that calls him the divine emperor. And so in a way, Jesus traps them by saying, "You're asking me whether I should pay taxes, but they're, basically say they're graven images, we shouldn't do it." Or, yeah, pay taxes, but you're walking around with the coin in your pocket. So what do you want me to say? You've got that graven image there in your own pocket. You've got the denarius to show me. So what are you even asking me? Because there have been times where people have used this passage to try and say that Jesus is just very pro-government and pro-law following, and that no matter what the laws of the land or what the government does, that Jesus is sort of sanctioning just sort of unequivocal following of government and law. And I don't think that's at all what this passage is pointing towards. I think that this passage is more pointing to the idea that Jesus is not able to be trapped. And it continues on. Some of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus with a question. And that little parenthetical seems a bit petty from Luke, but it is important. The Sadducees were known for this, for not believing in the resurrection. And they were thought of as heretics by the Pharisees for that. And so their question here is basically another, it's another trap to say, well, if you believe in this silly resurrection thing, well, tell us about this question. And the question that follows, that I'll read here in a second, is one that is debated, and it's one that even is written about in almost an anecdotal way, where this kind of happens in one of the books making up the Apocrypha. So here it goes. Teacher, they said, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. And this was a law in the ancient world, and those very, very archaic ways of seeing marriage and gender roles. And women were seen almost as bartering chips and property in this very backwards sort of way. And so this law is sort of designed in one of those weird sort of perverse ancient ways to protect a woman. Because if she's widowed she has no children, she has no way to support herself. And we've talked about that through previous stories in Luke, where Jesus has he raised the widow's son who was dead, and he does different things for widows. And this law was a way to kind of provide a safety net for them. If their husband died and they had no children, they would then be married to their husband's brother, who then would try and provide for her children. Again, it's a sort of social safety net, even if it is backwards and perverse. And they did debate about these questions. Now there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died childless. The second and then the third married her, and in the same way the 7 died, leaving no children. So there's no heir, and then therefore no one has sort of primacy. Finally, the woman died too. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since 7 were married to her? And this is sort of implying, well, if you die and then you go, you're resurrected, then you'll be married, but who is husband number 1, essentially? And again, it's a trap question. It's not a real question in the sense that they're actually trying to find out the answer because they're keenly interested in it. Jesus replied, the people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. And they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are God's children, and since they are children of the resurrection. But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise, for he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Some of the teachers of the law responded, well said, teacher, and no one dared ask him any more questions. And so his answer is interesting. It's a similar appeal to what the Pharisees would do. They would argue for the resurrection, looking at the law and looking at the Old Testament and the books of Moses. And so Jesus does go back to Moses here. And this is another place where people will try and draw too much out of this passage and try and say, oh, well, that means once you die, you're no longer married. Again, I don't think that is the thrust of what Jesus is saying here. I think, again, the question is meant to trap him and have him come down on one side or the other and try and say, whatever, and then get people mad at him. And again, he just sort of sidesteps it and pokes a hole in it and instead constructs a different sort of way of viewing the world. And then it goes on. Then Jesus said to them, why is it said that the Messiah is the son of David? David himself declares in the book of Psalms, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." David calls him Lord. How then can he be his son? So Jesus comes back at them with his very own theological debate question that does silence them, and it shuts them all up. And in Matthew and in Mark's account, we do actually get that verse that comes, or not in Mark, but in Matthew's version of this story, we get verse 40 that came before it, and no one dared ask him any more questions. Luke sort of says that after Luke says that here in verse 40. In Matthew, he puts that after the sort of question that Jesus asked him about David. So basically, whatever the order of it, Jesus has shown that he's not going to be trapped. And so they stop asking him questions. They stop trying to get him to incriminate himself after this, because they have this sparring match. They have this back and forth. They've done their best, and Jesus has bested them. While all the people were listening, Jesus said to his disciples, "Beware of the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at the banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely." And I'm going to go ahead and read into chapter 21 a bit as well, because you'll see how it maybe connects. So I'll get a running start in verse 47. "They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. As Jesus looked up, he saw the rich putting their gifts into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins. 'Truly I tell you,' he said, 'this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on.'" And I've linked those there because it's interesting that Jesus talks about how the teachers of the law, the people he's decrying here, devour widows' houses, as in they're probably, repossessing them for taxes or whatever, and they, are basically not looking out for the poor. And then he looks up and sees rich people and a poor widow, and so he sort of ties those two together. So that's our Bible ponder for this evening, and we'll come back again here in the next wee while. We are coming up to Christmas, and I think we'll have a little break from these over the holiday period, but we'll come back eventually with these, and we'll let you know when that's coming up. So thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. Have a good week.